Looking at Russia in the early modern era, and last time we left off with Russia, they were under the Mongol tribute system. They were basically part of that Golden Horde, and the Mongols had gone in and they didn't rule Russia directly, but they collected tribute from Russia. And that period of tribute is going to last about 250 or so years. And so it's also going to have a big impact on Russia's development. And so that's where we're going to pick up today is Russia at the beginning of this early modern era. So when we look at Russian society, it was very different from what was going on in Western Europe during the early modern period. First off, because they had been under that Mongol tribute system, during that 2.5 centuries, they tended to have closer ties to Asia and had been kind of cut off from Western Europe. And because of that, they basically missed out on a lot of the important developments that were going on in Western Europe, including things like the Renaissance and the Reformation and a lot of the Enlightenment ideas that were beginning to spread. They also were a very diverse group of people. Many different religious divisions. You had groups of Catholics, you had Orthodox Christianity, you had some Protestants that were beginning to spread. You had Muslim communities as well. And you also had many different ethnic groups. And so even though you had your dominant Russian peoples, there were many lesser ethnic groups throughout the region. And so it was a very divided territory. And this was very different from what was developing in Western Europe with the rise of individual nation states. Russia was a very ethnically diverse state. Also, autocratic governments. You had the Prince of Moscow, who was gaining some centralized rule. We're going to talk more about that here on the next slide. But you had many Russian princes that kind of dominated their individual regions. And Russian society was dominated by that Russian nobility, the boyars, who had quite a bit of power over these vast estates. And Russia was still relying on serfdom. Serfs provided most of the labor and taxes. And remember, the whole reason why serfdom spread in Russia was a reaction to Mongol rule. Peasants had to reduce themselves to serfs in order to meet those tribute payments. Also, Russian society was very rural. There weren't many large cities, and they still were a very agricultural economy. And not just agricultural, but still relying on very old agricultural techniques. And really their only key export item was grain. And so as we start with Russia here at the beginning of this early modern era, Moscow had gained some centralized power as being the chief tribute collector for the Mongols. And so they kind of collected tribute from the other Russian princes and passed that on to the Mongols. And again, peasants had reduced themselves to serfs in order to guarantee these taxes and provide labor. And that's kind of where we pick up with Russia here. They were still kind of paying tribute to what was left of the old Mongol Golden Horde. So things are going to begin to change under Ivan III. Ivan III, also known as Ivan the Great, is going to declare Russian independence from Mongol rule. He's going to end those tribute payments, and then begins this period of rapid expansion, or what he called gathering in the Russian lands. And the whole purpose of this rapid expansion was to basically drive the Mongols as far away as possible so that they were no longer a threat. And so to help settle these newly conquered territories, they're going to rely on these free peasants called Cossacks. Cossacks were these frontiersmen, these peasants who had settled on these newly conquered lands, and they helped kind of gather in this land for Russia. And this period of expansion is very similar to the westward expansion in the United States. These were your frontiersmen. They went out there and settled on these lands and helped kind of solidify Russian control. And so with this, Russia is going to come to see themselves as the third Rome. and they build a highly centralized government modeled after the old Byzantine Empire. In fact, Ivan III is going to marry the daughter